Hello, my name is Jay Carpenter. I am founder of Desert Blockchain, and this is our monthly session on, excuse me, just one second, on Wednesday, October the 26th, 2022. It's 7 p.m. Arizona time. And for those of you that might not be familiar with Desert Blockchain, we have a monthly session for about an hour every fourth Wednesday of the month on various decentralized, DWeb, Web3, blockchain topics. And tonight we're going to be talking about military advantage and blockchain. And this is our topic to commemorate the publishing of the Bitcoin white paper on October 31st, 2008. So this is we're coming up on the 14th anniversary. And basically, most people still, when you talk about blockchain or Web3 or whatever, there's generally a variety of connotations that come up with that in terms of associating it with cryptocurrency and finance and so forth. And this topic is going to be a little bit different take on the whole decentralization and trust, decentralized trust, and so forth. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. By the way, if you are watching this on YouTube, you can join as a Desert Blockchain citizen on Patreon. There is a link underneath the video in the notes to the YouTube video, and you can join for $10 a month. We are mostly completely community supported, and that's how we basically pay for the expenses associated with the Desert Blockchain community. So we appreciate the people that are citizens, and one of the benefits is you get a link to the sessions where you can join live and engage in conversation. So let's get right into it, and let me grab my keyboard so I'm not jiggling around the camera. And so okay. Bear with me while this comes up on the presentation. So what we're talking about is a particular use case, which is blockchain in a conflict situation and a adversarial situation. And we're going to be starting our kind of exploration tonight on the case of the Ukrainian conflict and Ukrainian-Russian conflict that's currently underway. And the question I'm going to ask you to consider as we go through this material is, could the Ukraine's use of blockchain constructs be their competitive advantage at this point in keeping their communications systems open and being a financial network for them to distribute resources and so forth. And also they have raised quite a bit of money through their donations via cryptocurrency. So that's the question at hand. And so let's take a look at that and if that's a possibility. And we will also take a look and focus in on Estonia, which is their neighbor to the north. Why has Estonia been a very early adopter of blockchain technology and basically incorporated blockchain and decentralization into the fabric of their entire socio-political ecosystem and administrative system? And then we'll take a look at some of the other neighboring countries in the Baltic region. And we'll also take a look at how decentralization has performed under adversarial attack. And then we'll also look at, where is the United States military in this realm of decentralization and using distributed ledger technologies and so forth. And then I've got it labeled as next steps, but I'm going to assert that this whole realm could enhance peace through some of the advantages of decentralization and blockchain. So if you're familiar with Bitcoin and blockchain in general, you will know that the Bitcoin white paper that was published on October 31st, 2008, solved some long-standing problems in computer science, specifically a problem that's been labeled as the Byzantine generals problem. And that, I'm going to check my sound. Okay, good. And the Byzantine generals problem, I've always considered that to be just sort of an analogy, an example use case to explain how the Bitcoin blockchain works and why it works. And what I've realized by taking on this topic is this is actually also solving possibly a military issue that has been an age-old issue regarding coordination. So by doing this presentation and taking on this topic, I have a new appreciation for what we're dealing with in the realm of decentralization, and also a new appreciation for the genius of the Bitcoin white paper. But having set up the topic with hopefully that 100,000 foot view, let's talk about what is the Byzantine generals problem and what has it been since the medieval times, the 1400s, during the Byzantine Empire and so forth. It's probably been a problem well before that. But in an adversarial situation, let's say the centralized castle is being targeted for attack by the Byzantine army. And they are plotting, let's say the night before the attack, to attack the castle, the centralized castle, at a certain time the next day. And it will require that the different generals, the different battalions, the different sections of the military of the Byzantine army must attack by surrounding the centralized entity, and they must attack in a coordinated fashion. And it must happen simultaneously. If there's any breakdown for whatever reason from one of the sections of the army because of miscommunication or traitors or some other unforeseen circumstance, then the Byzantine army is sure to be defeated, because the centralized force will be stronger to attack in just one particular direction. But if the Byzantine army can attack simultaneously by surrounding the centralized fortress, then they will win, and that will lead to victory. So this is an interesting problem, and it's also couched as a problem for the prisoner's dilemma, where you've got two prisoners, they're being held, they're being interrogated, but they're separated, and they've made a pact before being arrested that they will deny that they are guilty. However, if either one of them admits that the two of them did the crime and there's a deal that's made for one of the two of them to get off easier, then they both basically lose. So, or they both come out with less than if they stay together and communicate and operate in a coordinated fashion. So that's basically the Byzantine general's problem. And the Bitcoin white paper solved this. And the innovation, there were the proof of work consensus algorithm was not, had been, proof of work had been explored many years before the Bitcoin white paper appeared. The genius was introducing a market mechanism for the rewards. And by introducing this market mechanism, Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever that was, who is credited with writing the white paper, the Bitcoin white paper, basically simultaneously solved a long-standing computer science problem, and I'm beginning to realize also solved a military problem of coordination. So that's what we're talking about tonight. Let's take a look at how that plays out. Here is a write-up on how Bitcoin's proof of work solves the problem of, or addresses the problem of the Byzantine generals. So you can read that. The link to this presentation is attached to the YouTube video, and it will become available to the public tomorrow on the 27th of October. So let's focus in on Estonia. Why Estonia? I'm going to talk about Estonia and how they were early adopters of decentralization and blockchain. Actually, they claim even before the 2008 white paper was written. So here is an excerpt from a write-up, basically a two-page write-up that was published by Estonia, talking about why and how they've adopted blockchain technology at such a very deep level in their government, in their society, in their financial systems, and so forth, and voting. Basically, they were early adopters of this because they felt they had experienced some breaches, some serious breaches. Estonia is also right on the border with Russia, and they have been concerned for a very long time of their vulnerability being next to a neighbor that might be considered adversarial. So out of the write-up, which I'm going to show you in a moment, they specifically highlight that millions of lives and resources are saved as the potential manipulation of defense data or smart war machines is prevented using blockchain technology. And that's a key quote in this context of looking at this decentralization blockchain construct in a different light than we normally look at it via cryptocurrencies and in the financial system and so forth, and payments. So in addition, I pulled out this quote from the paper: the particular blockchain technology used by Estonia, KSI blockchain by guard time, has been proven to work and is today even used by NATO and the US Department of Defense. Now, this is a piece that was written in early 2020, just to give you a time frame on the idea. So to continue to look at, and this is the actual piece, which you can read in its entirety from this presentation, or you can simply Google Estonia blockchain, and this is one of the top articles. So that's where I pulled the quotes. But if you go a little deeper and look at Estonia, they have an e-Estonia website, and it is a pretty elaborate description of what they are doing with blockchain, as well as most of interest to me was their history and the reasons that they have adopted blockchain and decentralization. So here is part of that website that talks about their blockchain technology, which they are saying that they adopted in 2008, which was the year that the Bitcoin white paper was published on Halloween of that year. But you can see over the left, they've got a timeline, and you can click on that timeline and see how their adoption has progressed from incidents that happened as early as 1991. So here is a video you can watch on their applications to blockchain in cybersecurity and voting, and their identity construct that they use for their citizens to participate in the Estonia government as well as society. So here is another piece that was written by, I believe, PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, I believe, and it goes into great detail on how Estonia is creating their digital republic, which is secured by blockchain. Now, this is an interesting article because in this article, the president, Tomas Henrik Ives, says he spent 10 years building an open government, wants to make it impossible to do bad things on the internet. And basically, I believe this article highlights that a prime driver of their adoption of these decentralized constructs is as a defense mechanism against, as they call it, anti-Russia. So, right, wrong, whatever your views are on the situation, Estonia has felt that they would be in a better position to defend themselves using blockchain and decentralized technologies. So here we're going to shift to the Ukraine. This is a video that you can watch. It's about 8 minutes, but it talks about the attacks that have happened in the Ukrainian conflict with Russia since the beginning of the conflict earlier this year. And it talks about the elaborate challenges to the Ukrainian information systems, to their electricity grid, to their all their utilities. And it's pretty amazing the depth of the digital warfare, cyber attacks that have taken place in this particular conflict. Now, here's another article also from Wired, and basically the title is "The Digital Battle with Russia Isn't Going as Expected." And how it's not going as expected is that the Ukrainians have withstood the full force attack and challenges and adversarial operations that Russia has launched on the Ukraine. And it says under the byline is, even the head of the country's online offensive is surprised by the success, although they're not without controversy. So you can read that article and get a little more depth into, exactly what's transpired here. Here are just some Google searches that you can do the same searches on your own if you want, but Ukraine has used cryptocurrency to fund the war. That's from The Economist. and also crypto goes to war in the Ukraine by Wired, and the Ukrainian government turns to crypto from Elliptic and so forth, and they bought considerable amount of military equipment using the cryptocurrencies. So this is an additional search, but it talks about how the Ukrainian government is experimenting with and intending to launch their own, basically, central bank digital currency built on the Stellar network. And Stellar has worked closely with the Ukraine to plan and position them to launch a central bank digital currency. And also the people that are part of the Stellar Foundation have testified before the United States Congress about the Ukrainian situation. They've also testified about central bank digital currencies. So I'll leave it to you to Google Stellar and their activity, both with the Ukraine as well as the United States government regarding this decentralized movement and the possibilities in this realm. So here's an article from CoinDesk on, again, the Ukraine commercial bank to test digital currency built on Stellar. And by the way, we follow Stellar, and we're participating in the Stellar Community Fund at this moment. A group of us from Desert Blockchain have formed a team, and we are in the running to be finalists in the Stellar Community Fund number 11. So although I don't have much, I don't think I have more than a couple $100 worth of Stellar. I am very interested in Stellar, and I am part of a team that is competing in a competition at this point. So just to be in full disclosure about our relationship with the Stellar network and ecosystem. Now let's shift a little bit in the Ukrainian situation and talk about the role of drones. And drones, and I don't follow the news in the Ukrainian Russian conflict to a great degree, but it does seem to me, as this article from Al Jazeera highlights, that and I think this was from October 20th of 2022. The involvement of drones in this conflict seems to be increasing. And Al Jazeera has labeled this as the future of warfare. And I'm going to talk about how drones and blockchain fit together here in a moment. But here is an article from earlier this year from the Wall Street Journal talking about the United States military's new challenge, defeating cheap hobbyist drones. And you can read that, but basically our military leaders are very concerned about how drones can be deployed. And we're not talking about the multi-million-dollar drones. We're talking about basically drones that can be purchased off the shelf in pretty much any electronics store, or could be built from scratch. How these drones, which might seem to be a piece of hardware, but when you really look at a drone, it's mostly software. But these are now being considered a serious part of military conflicts. So here again is a Google search that you can go through some of these items and see some of the latest research and developments on how drone warfare and blockchain are sort of melding together. So you could consider that the blockchain might be like an electronic, decentralized, very robust, very resilient, like air traffic controller for drones in military situations, as well as other situations like delivery and so forth. So that, in my mind, is a very important piece of what is happening in the Ukrainian-Russian conflict. Now, to circle back to Estonia, here you can see Estonia has an active ecosystem of drone startups. This is a piece from, I believe, a venture capital fund, and they've highlighted they've identified 15 startups in Estonia that are focusing on drones. And they've, this particular company has decided to focus on 10 of those 15. But I would say that's a pretty sizable amount of activity for a country the size of Estonia. So let's shift a little bit to the Baltic states. And the Baltic states are those states that I've circled in blue frames that are basically on the western border of Russia. And that obviously is where the Ukrainian conflict is happening. If you look at a map of Russia, you'll see that the rest of the border of Russia is pretty much covered by other countries like China and North Korea and so forth that are of a different character than the Baltic states. And you can see to the left that I believe it was back in 2017. Yes, this article is dated November 14th, 2017. Basically, the Baltic states, I think it was Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, got together and said, hey, we're going to sort of form an alliance and support blockchain technology development. Now, keep in mind, this is 5 years in the past, but also keep in mind that many of these countries on the western edge of Russia were concerned and basically considered themselves in a vulnerable position when the Crimea conflict occurred, and they were able to watch what happened there. So here's a little bit of what's going on in Latvia. Excuse me, you can read this item, but you can see that Latvia in a Baltic and Latvian context has a considerable initiative taking on blockchain and the various dimensions that we're talking about. Lithuania, also like Estonia, has created a very elaborate website called Blockchain Lithuania. And this is just a couple of pieces, but you can see that they have a very committed and concerted effort to boost their level of development, involvement, activity in blockchain in all its dimensions. And on the right, you can see the whole, snapshot of some of the pieces of the community that are involved in this initiative. Now, Belarus, a little bit different story from what I've read. And again, I'm not an expert on these countries or that sort of thing, but Belarus looks like it's not quite as enthusiastic about blockchain. However, they are relaxing and embracing cryptocurrency to some degree in their particular country. Now, Russia, on the other hand, Russia has been identified, as well as China, in having a lot of interest in blockchain and spending resources on developing blockchain. However, I would assume and assert that they probably have a different context for their deployment of blockchain. And you can see that Vladimir Putin signed a law banning digital asset payments in Russia earlier this year. Now, I've read some other pieces in the news indicating that they are sort of reconsidering that, and they are looking at cryptocurrency as a potential favorable way for them to use financial resources throughout the world. So you can read about that as well. Now let's shift a little bit to the United States. And this is a talk that was given actually right here at Arizona State University in the Cronkite School of Journalism. I think it was 2016. And this is one of the most powerful talks that I have seen pretty much at any time. And Thomas E. Ricks is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist and author and national security expert. But the crux of his talk, which was titled, "Why I Fear We Will Lose Our Next Big War," has the crux of his talk is that countries, and you be the judge in terms of how the United States fits into this, but countries are generally arming themselves to fight the last war, not necessarily the adversarial challenges that they will face in today's environment. And one of the things that Thomas E. Ricks says in this is that if he were in charge of the military in the United States, he would be directing that the military academies, West Point, the Naval Academy, and so forth, be focusing on encouraging or maybe requiring the cadets to become computer science at least literate, if not majors, and to be able to learn at least one foreign language of a potential adversary in the future. So I highly recommend this. I've shown this in other presentations, but it continues to be a very, very valuable piece in my opinion. And I think this is just a summary. This is only like 7-8 minutes, but the full talk is linked in this particular item. Now, here's another thing I came across, and again, I'm not totally an expert on the United States military and so forth, but this is a fairly recent talk that was delivered by, I believe, an Air Force Major, Mike Knapp, and he goes through and does a pretty good analysis of where the United States military stands in terms of their development on blockchain. And the crux of it is his point is that we're not up to speed with the rest of the world in this realm. And specifically, here's basically an excerpt from towards the first part of his talk. But he says, U.S. government views blockchain technology of tomorrow, while competitors aggressively pursue efforts today to integrate blockchain data and information and the information environment. And he asserts that China is well ahead. And again, this is his opinion. So you have to view this in that context. But and then he talks about the China and Russia and their activity. But he says the Department of Defense should explore blockchain technology with the same earnestness as other emerging technology research to jumpstart that discussion. blockchain is not a weapon by itself. It is a critical enabling technology of the information environment. The challenge is not only educating more people inside the US government about blockchain technology, but also mastering blockchain and its applications as a nation first. And so it goes on. This is another item, and again, I'm not completely familiar with the source of this article, but it looks like it is a legitimate source. But it's showing that the research and development investment by the defense departments of the United States has been flat for the last, well, including this year. I think it's 48 million, 58 million, and 48 million. And basically, compared to, I think, the overall defense budget's in excess of $100 billion or maybe more, I'm not sure. But it seems like it's not exactly on the top of the priority list. So here is an excerpt from a study that you can see on the left side of the screen, the potential uses of blockchain by the U.S. Department of Defense. And this is one of our folks in Congress who is in the House of Representatives. And basically, he is also echoing that, hey, the United States is in a position of being behind in this realm. So you can take a look at that as well. And my scanning of where the applications are being put forth in blockchain by the military seems to be in supply chain. And, yes, that's definitely a legitimate use, but the focus of the research that I've just done a brief study so far looks like the military is looking at blockchain as a tool in more like the operations versus actually being an important part of the defense and bolstering the resilience of the overall operations and the military construct itself. So just as a reminder, here is another look at the same image. You can see Moscow, where it's at, and I have them circled in red as centralized because it seems to me that clearly it is a top-down operation from the military and from the administration and so forth. But you can see the relative positions of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, and the Ukraine. So I think it's important to keep that in mind and sort of track the developments as the conflict unfolds, and hopefully it will come to a conclusion sooner rather than later. But this is how things stack up geographically. A peaceful conclusion, that is. So now we're going to shift a little bit to just decentralized constructs in general, and how have they stood up in adversarial situations. Another one of our projects at Desert Blockchain and Desert Blockchain Camp is the Interplanetary File System and Protocol Labs and their construct called Filecoin. This is a talk that was given by Juan Benet in 2016, a TED Talk, and I highly recommend watching this. Juan does a great job of explaining where DWEB is decentralization, the importance of these initiatives in a very broad societal, economic, and policy and political set of contexts. So this is the website, but more importantly, this is how the interplanetary file system has stood up under state-level adversarial situations. Basically, the Turkish government at one point disabled the Turkish Wikipedia site. And the folks and this is in 2017, for whatever reason, there was effectively a takedown of the Turkish Wikipedia site. Well, the folks at IPFS stepped in and were able to recreate the site on IPFS, which is a decentralized file storage construct, peer-to-peer. And as far as I can tell, it has withstood any sort of adversarial activity since 2017. In addition, and here's an article from the Observer that goes into a little more depth on this. But in addition to that, Spain also censored some material on the web. I believe this is also in 2017, in the Catalonian situation. And again, the folks at Protocol Labs and using the construct of the IPFS file system were able to reconstruct that content, and I believe to this day it is still intact and available for people to use and consume. Now, I believe the same thing has happened, or something similar has happened in China as well. And certainly there's situations in Hong Kong that have also warranted some real life use cases of these decentralized constructs. And let me talk about that just a little bit at this point. And I'm gonna stop sharing for just a moment, because, you know, in my view, in the technological realm, there's a lot of things that are talked about, a lot of things that get excitement, a lot of things that fall into the category of what I would call buzzwords. They look like they're going to work. There's a lot of money that can be put into these realms, and I'm not going to name some of them, but basically some of them are not holding up in real life application. And, you know, they might work to some degree, but they don't work as envisioned, and they don't work the way the expectations were laid out. Blockchain is not in that category, at least not in its ability to withstand adversarial situations. So every day that the Bitcoin blockchain is up and intact, you can be assured that it is constantly under attack, and it still runs 14 years. Well, it wasn't up when the paper was published, but it started to operate, I believe, in 2009. But the point is that there's a huge amount of value associated with these blockchain constructs, Ethereum, and, you know, you can go down the line, Stellar, and they are proving themselves to be resilient against attack, day in, day out. The same holds true, as far as I can tell, for some of the constructs that are decentralized, but yet are not directly associated with blockchain, like the interplanetary file system. So part of the reason for focusing on the application of these decentralized constructs and blockchain in the Ukrainian-Russian conflict is to highlight that we're not talking about theory here. We're talking about real life, basically as severe as I can imagine, conflict that's happening, and these the blockchain constructs are being deployed, and you've got two sides. One side that's their life depends on it, and the other side that they feel that their life and their safety depends upon it, and they would like to take it down. So I think that's important to realize that we're not talking about theory, we're not talking about prototypes, we're talking about real life, real conflicts, and that, in my view, is the ultimate test for any kind of technology or construct or so forth. So that's my little point regarding the relevance of this. We'll go back to the screen share. So to continue, another key dimension that you might consider to be part of the decentralized tool set is Starlink. So now, excuse me for just a moment. Now, I realize that recently there's been some, let's say, conversations about Starlink and the financing of it and the payments, who's going to pay for the Starlink operations in the Ukraine and so forth. But if you put that aside and you look at the role that Starlink has played in the Ukrainian conflict, I think it's pretty clear that Starlink has been a pretty vital networking connection point for the Ukrainians as their infrastructure has been attacked and destroyed and commandeered, for that matter. So Starlink, I think, is a key consideration, and maybe it's not Starlink, maybe it's one of their competitors that's gearing up to launch, competing services. But the satellite communications in the same realm of Starlink are opening up a new level of resiliency worldwide that allows some of these decentralized constructs to operate and actually thrive. And by the way, IPFS, I didn't include the slide, but IPFS and Filecoin and Protocol Labs are working with Lockheed Martin to experiment with those DWeb and decentralized and blockchain constructs to operate in space as well. So now we circle back to the Bitcoin white paper, and hopefully this prior discussion shines some light on some new dimensions of Bitcoin, blockchain, decentralization that might not have been obvious, or realms that might not have been top of mind when we're talking about this new emerging realm. So we don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto was or is, and it's still a mystery. But in my mind, when I looked at the resiliency of this construct and how it addressed the Byzantine generals' problems in both computer science, and now it's pretty clear that it can be applied. The same constructs might be applied and are being applied as we speak in a military situation. I think this is a remarkable achievement and piece in basically about 9 pages, something that set off a whole new movement that has far-reaching impact and benefits and consequences. So, and by the way, one of the dimensions of the Bitcoin white paper is it unleashed the power of market potential. The market for the Bitcoin rewards, the incentives, and so forth. It was market-based. And that's another key piece that I'd like you to consider during these next few items. Because now we're going to transfer into the possibility of these decentralized constructs being key tools in the realm of peace. So here is one of my favorite talks by the Nobel-winning economist Milton Friedman, and it's called I Pencil. And basically in about less than 3 minutes, Dr. Friedman talks about the power of markets and the power of markets to bring potentially adversarial segments of human being together and have them cooperate and possibly usher in peace. So I ask you to consider that although we've talked about military dimensions of this decentralization and blockchain, I ask you to consider that the military considerations might pale in comparison to the peaceful vectors that are being unleashed in this realm. Now, here's another talk. It's a TED Talk, and there's a quote: "When goods do not cross borders, armies do." And you can flip that around to say, "When goods cross borders, armies stay home." This is a talk by a woman who's obviously very committed to this, and she's seen the impact of markets and trade and so forth in some countries that were in, let's say, shortage of resources and other significant problems. This quote actually, I believe, is attributed to an economist by the name of Basquiat, and I might be mispronouncing his name. Anyway, this is a really good talk, and she gets kind of emotional at the end. But I subscribe to this point of view that freedom in markets can be a critical instrument of peace. To me, it's very sad and very puzzling how we've gone to war so many times with various countries, and then what happens? We end up trading with them. And in my view, that happened with China, where and this may not be popular, but in 1972, President Richard Nixon visited China and opened up trade with China, possibly, in my view, again, averting World War III. And that's sort of the theme that I would like to conclude this talk and this presentation about. To circle back to Stellar, this is a introductory video on Stellar, and it shows how the power of global financial transactions can deliver a new level of prosperity and peace and safety to people all over the world. And you could say the same thing about other initiatives, Ethereum, take your pick, Bitcoin, and so forth. But this particular video and the people at the Stellar Foundation are very committed to having the Stellar network and platform usher in the ability to have people be able to create financial transactions all over the world. And that is something that, whether it's Stellar or whoever it is, I definitely support. So here's the last thing that we will conclude with, which is by Sun Tzu, I believe is how you pronounce his name, from the book, The Art of War. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And my wish out of taking a look at, these constructs and what is unfolding and basically what I'm committed to and what many of the people in the Desert Blockchain community are committed to is seeing what are the dimensions we can usher in that further the betterment of mankind. So this is a little bit about me. This is how you could contact me, and I will stop screen share and basically conclude for tonight. So thank you if you're watching this on the recording. I appreciate your time and attention. Hopefully this opened up some dimensions of the decentralized realm that weren't necessarily apparent. I will qualify everything that I've said as I don't think it can be fully assessed in a time of conflict, just the extent to which these tools are or are not being used, because obviously, there's a lot of secrecy around what is being used, how it's being used, and so forth. And some of the things that I've said this evening are conjecture on my part. I don't really know. I'm not totally an expert in this, in military affairs or so forth. And I just don't know. But I did want to share with you my intuitions about this and some of my views. Others might have completely different views, and I can certainly appreciate that. But that's it. That's it for tonight. Thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned for the fourth Wednesday of every month. We have a session like this. It might not be in November because I didn't look at the calendar, but we might be up against Thanksgiving, so we might have it on the third Wednesday. But we also have on the second Saturday in this space behind me, actually next door to this, we've moved. We do have an open house, and it's from 11 a.m. to about 2 p.m. And you can find that information on meetup.com under Desert-Blockchain, I think it is. So we haven't announced it yet for November, but that's it's a space where we can fly drones in here. We can experiment with blockchain, decentralized technologies. We are working on a submission to the Stellar Community Fund 11, which involves near field communications, non-fungible tokens, and obviously the stellar lumens and so forth. And it's basically a way to make it easier for humans to interact with some of these decentralized value payment methods and hopefully some cool devices. So if you're a citizen, thank you very much on Patreon for $10 a month. We appreciate your support there. And again, my name is Jay Carpenter. Please feel free to reach out and contact me if you have any comments, suggestions, or thoughts on this particular presentation or any of the other ones that we've done. So thank you. Have a good evening, and we look forward to your participation in the future. Goodbye.